We'll call the city council meeting to order. Deputy Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Miney?
Here.
Germaine?
Here.
Lamore?
Here.
Elder?
Here.
Whitman? Here. Angeli?
Here.
And Mayor Clark.
Here. I'd ask we all please rise for the invocation. Remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Guide our working together. Give us the wisdom to make the right decisions, your understanding to listen to each other, and your compassion to promote the peace and welfare of the residents of this community.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we start our agenda here this evening, I just want to say I know that Clerk Treasurer Lavoie is here, but also Deputy Clerk Paula Smith is here this evening and assisting us. And so just want to say welcome, and we'll move through the agenda together with council and you. Thank you.
The opportunity to let her train this evening. Appreciate it.
That's wonderful. So next item on the agenda, please.
The next item on the agenda is the opportunity to amend the agenda.
Items on the agenda to be amended here this evening, looking at council, administration, seeing none. Next item, please.
The next item is citizens' comment not related to an agenda item, and we do have a letter that we had a resident ask that it be read into the record.
Okay, we'll start with the letter, and then we'll see if there's others here who wish to speak this evening.
This letter is from Marjorie Kramer, and she lives at 7736 Beachway Drive. Hello to you all. In reading Mr. Angeli's call for deeper dive recently in the Monroe News, I was distressed at one part of his comments. It was specifically about the rental inspections. In the city of Monroe, I am a small landlord owning 2 rental properties. My properties and units are well maintained and always pass the rental inspection with flying colors. In trying to keep my rents very reasonable for my tenants, I object to any inspection movement to annual. This would increase my costs for those from $300 every 3 years to $300 per year, or $900 every 3 years. This is over a 200% increase from me, or a $17 per month rental increase from my tenants. 2 of my tenants are senior citizens and 2 are young persons. This will cause a strain on their budget for housing. Housing costs and rental rates basically rise in the city and state due to the ever-increasing property taxes. I get no relief due to being non-resident and non-homestead, and insurance and maintenance costs. Increased costs due to increased rental inspection schedules only adds to the problems of affordable housing. What I would suggest as a solution to Mr. Angeli's observations, which I agree with the older housing stock south of the river is this. 1, look at the rental inspection results for each rental property for the last 4 inspector cycles or 12 years. 2, owners/landlords with more than 3 to 5 violations be corrected within each inspection should be flagged. 3, repeat violation in the 4 inspection cycles on 12 years should be flagged. Once a slum landlord, always a slum landlord, I say. 4, repeat violators should be put on an annual inspection, require change of the ordinance. 5, landlords/owners who repeatedly have good inspections should stay on the inspections every 3 years, kind of reward for keeping a well-maintained property. 6, enforce the current blight ordinance. I see from the comments Mr. Angeli made that a lot of this is blight with the monetary teeth. I basically agree with Mr. Angeli's observations as I travel through the city every day and check on my rentals. I, too, do not like the condition of many of the houses. Many of these houses are individually owned homes with their owners living in them. What is done to them? When houses decline due to lack of maintenance or care, it affects the value of my properties, too. Please contact me if needed. And then she left her phone number for further contact.
Are there any other comments from those present here this evening? Any comments for those present? Seeing none. Next item, please.
The next item on the agenda is communications, item 2340, cancellation of scheduled Public Act 425 agreement public hearing.
Thank you. Mr. Pastu?
Thank you, Your Honor. We have this item on as a communication item. No action is requested of the City Council. If you recall, last month the council scheduled a public hearing regarding Public Act 425 agreement with Frenchtown Charter Township related to the Lazy Boy site. 425 agreement is a jurisdictional transfer in which it was proposed to transfer 8.5 acres on the Lazy Boy site from the township to the city. Contained in the proposed agreement was language regarding property tax sharing based on the development of the site that would take place. We met with the township approximately 3 weeks ago, and they declined to move forward with this proposed agreement. As a result, we're recommending no action tonight other than to just inform the council. We did subsequently meet with the township. They're entertaining a different form of the jurisdictional transfer, not nearly to the extent from a property standpoint. We were proposing 8.54 acres. They're looking at 8.2, I believe 8.23 acres. There's a sliver of land just north of Greenfield Avenue that they they would like to keep within the jurisdiction of the township, but it also entails a possible land swap that they have proposed for the Quality Inn Hotel over on North Dixie. And so at this point, we're not moving forward, obviously, with the proposed public hearing, but also following through on their proposal that we had received last week from them. So.
Thank you, Mr. Pastu. I don't know if it's appropriate to make comments now, but I had this in my list to make comments later. I guess now, since it's up on for a communication, we can have the ability to, I guess, any comments for the administration. I'm just going to start and make a brief comment. Having been with Mr. Pastu, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Green, the city attorney, in attendance at the discussions at Frenchtown Township, I'm greatly disappointed that we're not going to be moving forward on a 425 agreement. I think it was an opportunity for a partnership on a development in a fashion that was probably the simplest and most beneficial, not just to the city, but also to Frenchtown Township, our region, and an economic development opportunity. It doesn't deter, at least the city and I think council, myself, as we're going to move forward and how we best achieve the highest and best use for the Lazy Boy property, working closely with Lazy Boy, a developer who's come forward, and how we get there. I'll just say I'm not going to say that the opportunity of a 425 may not come up in the future as we continue to have these discussions with Frenchtown. But I am disappointed that we're not going to be able to have well, we could have a public hearing, but it doesn't make sense to have a public hearing about a 425 agreement when the other partner involved has chosen not to be a participant. So always leave the door open for that as we progress in our discussions. And I'm sure council will be getting additional information from the administration in the response that Frenchtown did have and what they are looking, at least as what in relation to the property. I'll leave it at that for now, and but wish we would be having this hearing for the right reasons. I don't know if there's any other comments from council. If not, since I didn't save it at the end, I just figured it was here. I might as well say it now. Okay, if there's no other comments at this point. Next item, please.
Next item on the agenda is council action. Item 2351, approval of furnishings for new fire station.
Thank you. Mr. Pastu.
Thank you, Your Honor. City Administration is recommending council authorization to purchase furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the new station in the amount of $102,037 with NBS Commercial Interiors. It's very comprehensive, covering offices, maintenance area, EMS storage, dormitory, conference room, the community training room, kitchen area, lobby. It is steel case furniture. Pricing does include the installation and shipping related to in the pricing itself. Contained in our budget is that was amended late in 2018. We had $150,000 for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Obviously, this amount is a smaller amount, but we do still have a few purchases, such as a smart screen and some digital message boards that will be going along with some smaller items. So We're requesting approval of this. It was part of the budget, not included as part of the guaranteed maximum price that we had with Auk Construction. There's a handful of items that we are responsible for outside of that agreement with Auk. But other than that, everything is moving very well with the project. In fact, at some point, we'll offer up with the council maybe an opportunity to visit the building and kind of tour it a little bit and see where we're at. But it's going quickly, and I think we're all very pleased with the progress that's being made.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion to approve the purchase with NBS Commercial Interiors in the amount of $102,037 for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the new fire station.
Support.
There's a motion by Councilman Michelangelo, supported by Councilwoman Vining, regarding item 2351, the approval of furnishings on the new fire station. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Yes. Germaini?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Whitman?
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item, please. Oh, yes.
Next item on the agenda is item 2343, 2019 Underground Utility and Resurfacing Program Bid Award.
Thank you. Mr. Pastu, I know we had that on our work session. We did not get that far. We had many items to cover, but probably fits right now, maybe some of that information if appropriate, and then about this kind of lengthy item.
So we're asking City Council to approve the underground utility and resurfacing bid. We did have only one bid, and it did come in substantially higher than the engineer's estimate. And part of what it is, and I'm going to have Mr. Lewis come up and talk a little bit with City Council about how Mr. Lewis and Mr. Leroy were able to try and work this to move forward, since most of our expense was in the underground water utilities. So, Mr. Lewis?
Okay. Honorable Mayor and Council, Patrick Lewis, Director of Engineering and Public Services. You know this was a complex one when it took me the better part of a day to write up the fact sheet for it. So I will tell you this was an interesting one to try to get in budget. Mr. Pastu is passing out for you sort of a one-page summary to supplement the fact sheet, which was lengthy enough on its own. But we wanted to kind of break down a little bit as to what went in this. So just as a little bit of background, I'll try not to read this verbatim, but for the benefit of those watching, I'll kind of summarize the bullets on here. For the past several years, we've had, I think all of you have known going through the capital improvements process, what we do is we prioritize our streets based on their condition, and then we recommend those improvements to council. And typically, Mr. Leroy and I get together ahead of that time, and we'll review his needs and try to make those clocks chime together, so to speak. So what we've been doing from a practical standpoint is bidding the utility work on one contract and the paving projects on the other. What's happened in most years is they've started to drift because the packages are big enough, and we have utility work that'll start in April and won't finish until July. A lot of times we miss a paving contractor's window. They get in here after Labor Day, and we're always pushing the end of the season. Last year it was even worse than that. We pushed the end of the season, and then we had an operator's lockout, and we actually didn't finish. So it just seems to keep getting worse and worse every year. So what we try to do is, and I coined the term, Toby from my staff coined this term, flipping the field. They call it when you have a big long punt on a football field that sends you from one end zone to the other. That's what we tried to do, and get contracts bid out a lot earlier this year so that we can hopefully take advantage of the early season, not only pricing but contractor availability, and get things kicked off. So we did that, and we also said, all right, how big is this job? Can we attract more bidders? Because recently we've been having only one or two bidders. Last year we only had one bidder on the paving program. That was Al's Asphalt, $1 million job. We only had two bidders on the water main program. That was about $1.5 million. And one bidder clearly wasn't interested because they overbid it so high that it didn't look like they had the time. So we really were working off of just single bids last year. So what we try to do is put a critical mass and put one large contract together, which turned out to be in the $3 to $4 million range. And we took a little bit of a gamble on that because there's only a certain number of contractors that can do that, but we were hoping to bring some of the bigger contractors get that interest. We did put in the directional drilling method, which was designed to minimize the disruption. We thought actually, based on last year's pricing where we did a lot of directional drilling work, that we could actually get the pricing down from open cut, traditional open cut contracting. And so then we put the completion date up at September 15th on everything. So by putting it all in one contract, puts the onus on one contractor. So we did this year engage, because at the time I only had 2 engineering staffers with me. I'll actually introduce you to my new one a little later this evening. So we didn't have time to do the design work, so we actually engaged a consulting firm to do that. We got everything out for bids and opened bids on March 11th. So I remember Councilman Icoangeli at the last council meeting being excited for our underestimate bids on North Custer, and I was nervously waiting this one. And unfortunately, we did only get one bidder. The bidder is a qualified bidder, and we've worked with them before, so we're at least comfortable with the bidder. And as I mentioned on here, I showed there's 5 different work locations that we've got on this one, and that's West Front Street from Telegraph to Harrison, Godfrey from Elm to Noble, Jefferson Court, which is the whole length, western to Huron, Hollywood from Elm to just north of Maywood, and Maywood Avenue from Macomb to Riverview. All but Front Street has both a water main project and a resurfacing project with them. Front Street actually has a small sanitary sewer realignment project near the Kohler's office and the Foltz Gallery. That's to correct some issues we have with the lines there. The Front Street project does have a paving job, and that's a little later on tonight's agenda. That's an MDOT funded project, so that had to be separated from the master contract. So that's why the paving wasn't included, because of the difficulty with putting all of this work as non-participating. So one thing I wanted to point out on Maywood is that we are narrowing the road there from 32 to 26 feet, and that's in keeping with our theme that we're trying to right-size our infrastructure, keep that down to where its needs are. I know our clerk treasurer may or may not like taking that down from 32 to 26, but that is what we're looking at doing there. So as I mentioned, we have one bidder. They did have 2 different paving contracts bid them as a subcontractor, but unfortunately we didn't get any, seems like we didn't get any better results than we did when we were splitting those up. The one statement that we'll make here, and I think it's getting pretty clear here, we don't have contractor capacity in the state right now. The times were so bad for so long that nobody was spending any money, and a lot of contractors either folded up, left town, went to other states. So it's kind of a global problem we have as a state here so we're still trying to keep ahead of that curve by bidding early, and we'll keep doing what we can around the margins. But so the bottom line is, and as you'll note in your fact sheet, we had set aside, and I'll give you a few more details that are on your sheet that Mr. Pastu passed out. But we did have the low bid that was there, the only bid that was there was 24.5% above the engineer's estimate. Now that exacerbated the problem that we had when we got when the final designs were done, the estimate was already over what we had set aside. So we were already over the budget based on the final design. So the total money set aside between the water fund, sanitary, wastewater fund, and the roadway project funds was about $3.7 million. The engineer's estimate at the time of bidding was about $3.8. Low bid came in at $4.736. Fortunately for the city's, I'll say general fund, it's not really general fund, but most of the overage was on the water side. So in other words, the street projects were not that far over the estimate, but the water projects were all drastically over. So I mentioned in here, how do we get here? What are we doing to try to get this thing back to where we can work with it? One of the things we're asking tonight is we're going to hold off on awarding the Godfrey piece, because that was the one that was the most over budget. That was around $500,000 over budget, and that's just a short run, like a quarter of a mile. And the big part of that reason is we have shallow rock in that area, and based on the depth we were proposing, which is our standard 5 feet depth, to get under the sewer leads in there with that 5 feet depth, we were going to be drilling entirely in rock, and that kind of spooked the bidder. So we're going to be working on other alternatives on that. So we're holding off on that for tonight, wanting to get the rest of it going, because the contractor has said they are ready to go. And especially on the Front Street job, we want to get that moving because it does have a large paving project to follow. So a couple of things we're looking at, means and methods that we're saying, can we save some money and are we comfortable with it? And one of those, which I listed, was almost $200,000 savings, and that was in the trenches. Instead of using what they call controlled density backfill, we're looking at using compacted stone in lifts, like 12-inch lifts. Historically, what we've tried to do with, it's affectionately known as K-Creek, that was a Kuhlman product, where it's flowable fill. It's basically got cement, sand, and you pour it out of a truck and it stabilizes, and that way you don't have to worry about compaction. But we got pricing on that, and there was a significant savings. Now there's a little more effort on the testing side, but we're comfortable with that as long as it's done in lifts, and so that was a significant savings to us. Another thing we were looking at doing is there's this fusible C900 PVC pipe is what we're using for the directional drilling, but the contractor offered an alternative to a Certalock product, where it's basically a mechanical joint. It takes the fusing out of that And that can be something where you don't have to stretch the pipe out as long, because with fusible pipe, you kind of have to stretch it in a lot longer runs. And so we were saving about $7 a foot on that, so that worked out to about $51,000 savings. So we're looking at that product, and we think we're comfortable with that. One of the things, and I know Councilman Felder brings this up when we have construction projects, he's asked this before on our contingency amounts. Our standard contingency is usually 15%. We have certain projects that are really small, like our sidewalk program, where you don't have that much dollar value and you have a lot of uncertainty that can come up. You add a slab here, add a slab there, and without a lot of money, it doesn't take much to get to your 15%. But when you're talking about millions of dollars of work here, do you need 15% across the whole spectrum? And Barry and I looked at this, and we both felt that 15% is probably a bit much when you're talking about a $4+ million award. So we were comfortable taking that down to a 10%. So that allowed us to work a little bit, not have to pull as much money out of reserves on either end there. And as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at Godfrey, whether we can put that in at 4-foot depth. We are doing some investigations tomorrow. We're digging in multiple locations, taking actual measurements down to the rock to try to develop a profile and revise those drawings to get that sort of requoted from the contractor. We ordinarily wouldn't, I'll call it, negotiate with the low bidder. If we make substantial changes to projects, we typically would go back out for rebids on those. However, in this case, we only had one bidder. And so that negotiation is, in my opinion, ethical and reasonable for us to do at this point. If we had multiple bidders, I would say no. So we're gonna approach the contractor and see what they can do for us on there once we can dial in a little bit better. And if we think we can safely shallow that up to 4 feet, if we can live with that, then that has the possibility of saving as much as $250,000 on that bid. So we're working this down. However, as I note at the bottom there, we're not able to get it all the way down. So on the street projects, we didn't stress too much about it. We're appropriating an additional $25,000 from local street fund reserves and $8,000 from the major street reserves. So that's those fund balance, and those the finance director is comfortable with both of those numbers. I would point out the major street number, we aren't appropriating all of that tonight because Godfrey isn't being awarded tonight, but we went ahead and did that, made those transfers already. The water fund reserves, we calculated an amount of about $409,000 for tonight's awards. And the reason I haven't committed to that number for the entire project is we don't know what the final number is going to look like for Godfrey. If it stays where it is, you're looking at something close to $500,000 in reserves to complete the fundage package for Godfrey. So if we can get that down $250,000, you may be talking about cutting that in half. So we are looking at bringing that to you either April 1st or April 15th, depending on how long it takes us to get numbers from the contractor. But I would point out, since we're working in 5 locations, we have plenty of time here. And the most important project was Front Street, because that's got the longest project area, it's got the longest sequence, and you're dealing with 2 contractors. Everything else is under the same contract, paving and water main. So total appropriation was, I'll just summarize it, $2.637 million for the water fund, $155,000 for the wastewater fund, $359,000 for the major street fund, and $788,000 from the local street fund equals the $3,939,000 authorization request in front of you tonight. I would point out, and this is just in case somebody notices this, the total award that we're asking for the low bid to be awarded to Zeiler. It looks like $3.8 million, and then it looks like we're only encumbering the $3.939. It's still a 10% contingency. What I did for mechanics purposes is, rather than award, it's unwieldy to try to award a contract less all these pay items. So we're going to award it as is, and then immediately do a change order to deduct the trench backfill changes and the pipe joint deduction. So it'll be more like $3.6 million. So I didn't want you to worry about the fact that it looks like we're only encumbering $100,000 contingency. It's just the way I have to present it, so that the contract paperwork doesn't become an unwieldy mess. So that's your bureaucratic answer. Mr. Pastu, have I missed anything of substance?
Excuse me, I think Mr. Lewis did a nice job in trying and explaining how we got to where we are tonight for this recommendation.
Well, obviously, it's a significant project. I mean, there may be some questions from council, and I'll also see if whether for the administration or for Mr. Lewis. But Kelly, I think you had a question to start, or Councilwoman Viney?
Yes, I just want to be clear, Mr. Lewis. So the 3.9 and some odd dollars that you're asking us to consider tonight, that's for all of these projects minus the Godfrey Avenue project?
And that includes a 10% contingency over what the actual items will be once we adjust the contract to reflect those changes.
And then, so once you get Godfrey figured out, we'll have to come back again and
Yes.
you'll ask for consideration on that separately.
Yes, and the
Okay.
contract was set up that we could, if we had multiple bidders, we set it up to say if somebody was low on Front Street and high on everything else, we could award Front Street to just one contractor. We could split it up by location if we wanted to. Obviously, that's a moot point with only one contractor.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Appreciate the question.
Colangeli?
So how many sets of plans were pulled by contractors?
We had we put it on Mitten, as we always do. We actually had them available for sale here if anyone wanted to buy them, if they didn't want to print their own copy. There was 73 pages on the plan set, so we charged $200 for it if anybody wanted them. We had something on the order of like 62 contractors that pulled it. It was a decent sized number, but the challenge is you got a lot of people on Mitten that sign up to get notified, and then some of them just pulled the advertisement. It looked like we had at least a couple more underground contractors that had pulled the majority of the attachments off Mitten. Some of ours don't always, because some of ours are standard specifications. So if they don't pull our general conditions, most of them already know them. They don't change from year to year. So it was kind of hard to tell. We looked at it the day of the bidding. We looked at it the week before. It looked like we might have 3 or 4 bidders that would come in. As it turned out, both Gherkin and Al's bid it as a subcontractor, not as prime. We did have conversation with Salenbean. And we believe that, obviously I think most people are aware that one of the principals with Salenbean was unfortunately killed this past year in an auto accident. So I think they're trying to focus on some of their core projects. They just got a large project, and I know they do a lot of demolition work, and I think that's what they're focusing a little more on. And frankly, that end of the business is a little more lucrative right now. We did talk to Lawrence Clark, who was our water main contractor last year. They said, we just got a large job, and I can't remember where it was. I want to say north of Detroit. And they said, we just can't do it. If we can wait to start till June or July, then we could do it. Obviously, here we are back in the same problem we always have. So I don't know what the answer is. The answer to that might be we bid next year's work in September and allow the water main contractor the opportunity to work through the winter. I mean, we might have to be in that situation if we're going to attract multiple bidders. But it looked like we might have 3 or 4 that came in and just it petered out for one reason or another.
The other question I have is, can you explain in a little bit more detail the difference between a fuse joint and a mechanical joint?
I'll try.
Is that part of the boring, or is that part of the actual pipe?
Well, it's the way, basically, for directional drilling, you have to have long segments of pipe because you're drilling a long run of several hundred feet at the same time. So you get in the hole and start pushing it through or pulling it through, depending on your method. And the fusing is part of the reason that was saving a little bit more money is that the prime contractor could do that work themselves. And so basically, it's if you've got some kind of mechanical joint, there's various different ways you can do it, but there's the standard push-on joints where you're just laying pipe in an open cut assembly, and then you've got various things. I'm not going to explain it very well here, but basically it has some locking mechanism where you have almost like it was described as zip ties, the method that we've got, but that sort of makes it sound cheap. But essentially, that's what you'd be doing. It's kind of pulling together. It's got an assembly that locks, and then you secure it with something that resembles zip ties, only a whole heck of a lot stronger.
Okay, is the $51,000 savings? What I'm concerned about is, will the mechanical joints give us problems in the future, which are going to create other maintenance issues versus if they just were to fuse the pipes together?
We don't believe so, but with any new method, obviously you're never 100% sure. And we did sort of agonize a bit about that. Mr. Leroy and I spent quite a bit of time deciding whether it was going to be worth, I don't want to say worth the risk, but it is a change. It's a change from what we're used to. So, and fusing, obviously, as you might expect, heats it up, binds it together, and that's it. It's not usually a likely failure mode there, although like anything else, anything can fail at any point.
How long have they been fusing them in the technology?
Barry, you got an idea on that one? I'm not 100% positive how long that's been. We haven't done directionally drilled pipe for very long, but I know that it's been done considerably longer than we've been doing it. So, my colleague,
Mayor and Council, Barry Leroy, Director of Water. The method that he's talking about, it's the Certilock product. That is, we've actually used that back in 2002 with a water district. They've made improvements to the mechanism. That's why we haven't used it. So that was an offer from the contractor, and they explained to us what improvements they've made. But Patrick, it's a mechanical joint. It's a push-on joint. And what he's talking about is the fusible method. You don't have to use a certified operator. So there's quite a bit of savings. You can use your own contractual employees to actually do the work. And you can do it in 20-foot sections. That's what the pipe sections come in. And then you just lock them together. You need the restrained joint to be able to pull the pipe back into the hole. So that's really the big change, the savings right there. And yes, we use that. We haven't had any leaks with the joints. The restrained part is only, again, for pulling it back into the hole. So once it's in the hole and in place and tested, there's usually no issue with it separating.
With the mechanical?
Yes.
Okay.
So. Thank you, Mr. Leroy. You did a far better job than I did on the technical aspects. I appreciate it. So
you're comfortable with the mechanical joint?
After reviewing this and discussing it for a significant length of time, I believe that we're comfortable moving forward.
Other questions or comments from council? I have one. So I was going through it because we know there's changes that are coming out with, as you always know, mandates that come out in projects. Looking at the, of course, with MDEQ and lead and copper rules and that changing, and obviously we're diligent where we are and as we go forward. But reading in here about the recognition of the lead and galvanized services, was that something that's, I know we're doing a replacement program, but for this project alone, does it kind of bring it up front and outside maybe the maintenance replacement is because we're doing it all along there or along the roads? Or I'm just curious if it impacted when we talk about price. It's not something we wouldn't do, or the cost isn't that we wouldn't expend it. It's the mandates that are there, but it's just coming together now with this significant projects that we have.
I'll answer that now, and Barry's standing by in case he wants to add something to it.
I know it might be his answer.
Which I was going to say it might be his answer. I can tell you, we've had as a policy right along to replace lead services as we come to them for the last several years. We had been for a while doing a 50-50 split with the property owners on galvanized. The only change is we're doing galvanized 100% our cost. The actual unit prices for those haven't changed from previous years. It's not like the contractor saying, oh, I'm going to bid those higher because it's more in demand or it's harder to do. The big change in our end is that we've got to take it with our crews from stop to house.
Right.
And we did actually solicit a price with part of this contract to see if the contractor was able and willing to do that cheaper than we can, and they can't. They bid it as like $3,500 per location from stop to house, and I think Barry, you said our costs are about half that.
Yeah. Okay.
So while part of the reason we wanted to make sure we awarded as much of this as possible, though, is because we're under the gun to do 5% of ours every year, and Hollywood, for example, is a treasure trove of those. There's quite a few of those. So by doing Hollywood, we're knocking out a lot on that one. So we have to get to a certain number, and as many of those as we can get to through our capital projects, the better. But that doesn't stop. Barry can still have his crews go out and do them in spot areas not part of a capital project to reach our number.
I bring it up because it is a topic, obviously, and very diligent the departments are in getting those replaced. But we have big projects like this, people start asking and wondering if it's something that I don't want people to think that there's issues we're not dealing with and why it's important it's coming along. So,
no,
Mr. Pastu?
We'll talk a great deal about this next Monday night when we go through the budget and the impact on the water fund. So,
yes, it is.
Councilman Michelangelo.
One last question. This is just kind of to educate myself. Typically, what's the size of a crew that would install the water with the directional boring?
Yeah, I was gonna say it. Yeah, probably 4 or 5 guys and gals. Say guys. It's a collective.
How much more of this do we have in the city to do?
How much more directional drilling, or we could. I don't want to say we're going to always directionally drill. I mean, we have talked about whether we need to go back to open cut so we can attract a few more bidders, because there's that issue too, that some people don't want to monkey around with this. But I would say, as our MO has been and probably will continue to be, in as many streets as I can do in a year, I try to lean on Barry and say, okay, let's do your water mains on those. So the streets are almost driving the water mains to a point, but I suspect there may be some times when he's going to need to get in front of us based on the needs. So I don't want to say 2 miles a year, but that's kind of, I think, what we would like to try to shoot to do. And I always laugh at him, say, I can throw a dart at a map and you're going to hit a street more than likely that has a 80-year-old water main on it. So a lot. We still got a lot to go.
Well, I guess the other question I have is, when you did the bids, did you bid them, did you do alternate open cut versus directional bore to see if there were other contractors that would have jumped in if it would have been open cut versus directional boring?
No, we didn't, but we're going to next year. We've already had that discussion, because last year we bid a couple of projects as a pipe burst, which is basically where you drag a new line through an old line. So it's sort of similar to a directional drill in that it's, it's more or less trenchless, but you're using the existing alignment. And the contractor offered us a voluntary deduct for a new alignment for the directional boring, and that saved us a lot of things on versus an open cut, because some of the things we deal with open cut construction are working around trees. And so we always have to do tree bores anyway, so we're going to have to shoot a bore under every one of the large trees we come to. Last year, it was pretty clear that we did better by directional drilling than we would have on open cut, because we were coming off of pricing that was known, and we did bid an open cut alternate in a couple of locations. So directional drilling was cheaper last year. I can't say for sure that would have been the case this year, but I can't say for sure we would have attracted any more bidders for the same reasons that we talked about. That sounded like Lawrence Clark was already committed, and Salem Bean wasn't terribly interested in bidding it this year. They weren't terribly interested in bidding last year. So it's kind of hard to say, but we did talk about that, getting such a jump on next year's construction now that we've freed up my design staff, that we're ready to go in between inspecting these jobs coming up this year, so that we think we can get this stuff out in August or September, and we will probably design them with both alternates and bid them with both alternates. Okay. Now, we won't have the volume that we have this year.
I don't want to complicate this issue any more than what it is, but just a food for thought is, if we're going to do 2 miles a year and doing directional boring versus open cut, and you're talking a crew of 5, does it make sense to run an analysis if the city of Monroe should be investing in a directional boring equipment and training our crews to do this work?
I'll
take a shot at that.
All of those things are on the table.
We are sufficiently concerned with the lack of contractors now out there, and Patrick and our Mr. Lewis and Mr. Leroy and I had a brief conversation about, do we have to be more engaged in some of this underground utility work? And so we'll talk more about it next week. Heretofore, I would have never in my wildest dreams ever contemplated that alternative, but given the reality of the very, very limited number of contractors that are now bidding on these projects, that we may have to come to that realization. So more to come on the analysis.
Very good question. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Any other final comments or questions? With that, thank you, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Leroy. With that, this item is up for council action.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion that we want to frame this correctly. That we agenda real quick. Make a motion that we move to award the contract for the 2019 Underground Utility and Resurfacing Program to E.R. Zeller Excavating in the amount of $3,939,000 which includes West Front Street, Jefferson Court, Hollywood Drive, and Maywood Avenue.
Okay, there's a motion by Councilman Michelangelo, supported by Councilman Lamore, regarding item 2343, the 2019 Underground Utility and Resurface Program Bid Award, as stated in the amount and locations. questions? Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining,
Yes.
Germaini,
Yes.
Lamore,
Yes.
Felder,
Yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Icoangeli,
Yes.
and Mayor Clark.
Yes. Next item, please.
Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And under item B, approval of payments to vendors, the amount should be $1,398,746.93. That's 1,398,746.93.
Are there any items on the consent agenda that council wishes to have pulled for further discussion? Councilman Felder.
Item number 2352.
Sorry. Other items on the consent agenda council wishes to have pulled for further discussion? Seeing none, are any items on the consent agenda those present here this evening wish to have pulled for further discussion? Any items from those present here this evening? Seeing none, a motion would be in order regarding consent agenda.
Your Honor, I motion that all items on the consent agenda not pulled for further discussion be accepted, placed on file, and any resolutions adopted.
Motion by Councilman Felder, supported by Councilwoman Germaini, that all items not pulled for further discussion from the consent agenda be accepted, placed on file, and resolutions adopted. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining,
Yes.
Germaini, Lamore,
Yes.
Felder,
Yes.
Whitman,
Yes.
Icoangeli,
Yes.
and Mayor Clark.
Yes. So look to,
Okay, so go ahead and read.
yep, next item.
Next item on the agenda would be item 2352, amendment to proposal for Lazy Boy sub-area plan.
Councilman Felder.
I came in to the meeting with an opinion on this matter, and my opinion was further strengthened by the results of our work session previously this evening. I was not, in reading the fact sheet, I was not a big fan of the alternatives, including big box store proposals. And MKSK, during their presentation previous this evening, also did not seem to prefer those alternatives. And furthermore, I think that the alternatives use land that is going to be unavailable unless this uncertainty with the 425 agreement with Frenchtown Township is going to be dealt with. And so I don't really want to spend money designing an alternative for a plan that I don't prefer, that the designer doesn't prefer, and that might not even have the potential of happening depending on the outcome of other agreements. I just think it's unnecessary and wasteful.
I'll look to Mr. Pastou, just maybe some discussion for the council as we move forward, and where that might be at and why this asked. But it's a good question to ask. Mr.
One of the
Pastou?
things, as you know, we've had some dialogue with the prospective developer, and certainly taking in consideration with the opportunity zone, there may be some different types of tenant mixes that would make more sense from their standpoint. They did ask us to look at some of these alternatives, and I will tell you that the developer, which is still engaged with us, was appreciative that we were willing to consider other alternatives and options. While the big box may not be one that we would necessarily all gravitate toward and be excited about, there are some other, I think, more modest larger box considerations that would go in there. But make no mistake, this is part of retaining the interest of a prospective developer to look at some other alternatives that may make more sense from their perspective and keep their interest in this site, of which it accomplished what we were looking for. So that's why the other three alternatives were included tonight, and why we asked them to prepare that I think otherwise, if this is what we were going to do, developer probably would have walked. And so we kept them their interest, knowing that we are flexible enough to work with them regarding other prospective alternative designs.
Councilman?
I guess my only response to that would be, if it's not a preferred alternative to us, we could certainly approve that proposal if the developer came to us with something like that. But I don't know that we need to lay out the red carpet to have him travel down paths that we'd prefer that he not. And furthermore, I don't know that there's a sufficient enough design standard for a big box store other than, hey, here's where the store goes, here's where the parking lot goes. And I think that that's going to come out in some architectural plans when the actual project's going to be underway anyway, if we end up going that direction at all.
If I may, at the moment in time, we had an interest developer, but they weren't very interested in what was initially proposed by MKSK. They would like to see if we were interested in other alternatives, and we said, sure. There's other ways in order to consider different alternatives, in this case, a little more commercial, but that's economic development. If you're going to attract and retain developers to redevelop sites, you've got to be willing to work with them. This whole exercise with the sub-area plan, the environmental work that we've done, the traffic analysis, is all a function of getting the site ready. Now we had somebody that was genuinely interested in it, and so we wanted to go the next step further, is to show them that there are other alternatives that we would be open to considering. Yes, we're not crazy about the big box, but there are other alternatives that we thought, and clearly the fact that the developer is still engaged with us is a function of the trust that he has in us to continue looking at this site. So I think it's, money well spent and may pay huge dividends in the redevelopment of the site.
Unless Andrew or Councilman, if you have further right now.
I'll certainly try and make this my last comment.
Oh,
Do we
you have more
anticipate do we anticipate that MKSK is going to include in the design plan alternatives that do not include the property that have been proposed for the 425 agreement? Because I would see that as making the amendment more worthwhile.
No, if I may, through the mayor, just the portion that Frenchtown Township north of Greenfield is very modest. I mean, I don't. To be honest with you, I don't think it changed from their original design, with townhouses and some commercial up on the Telegraph end of it. So that didn't. Most of the extra design work was related to looking at different commercial alternatives or retail alternatives within the context of the overall plan. I mean, clearly we told them we don't want to, forego a strong element that came out from the initial concepts from MKSK. But as it pertains to, the small area, the sliver just north of Greenfield, it didn't have any real impact on their extra work.
Michelangelo.
Your Honor, we got a couple comments. One, I kind of agree with Councilman Felder. I guess my preferred alternative is not to have a mini box or a big box on the property. However, I think it's prudent that when you're analyzing a site like this, you need to analyze all the alternatives. And the reason why I say that's regardless if it's for the developer or not, because when you analyze all the alternatives in terms of what some of the initial concepts were and then the big box alternatives, I look at it to take a look at what are we really getting in the way of square footage. And then based on those alternatives, you have a better baseline to develop what your taxable value increases are going to be, okay? Because a big box may not throw off as much taxes as other retail development or maybe 20 other townhomes. But you're not going to know that until you take a look at the alternatives. So I think when you're doing a conceptual plan like the sub-area plan, it's best to take a look at all options, just not some of the new urbanism ones, but to take a look at what could be done. What happens if you develop the site as suburban commercial? What happens if the site is developed more in the context of a lifestyle center? And what are we getting out of both of them? And then how do you make the comparison? So that's kind of how I was looking at it, which I think kind of rounds out the whole discussion on how the site could be used. I mean, it's unfortunate that Frenchtown did not participate with us in the 425, which would have been a win-win for everybody. The only difference would have been that under the 425, they would have given up basically land use and zoning control, but they would have still got their tax base, okay? But I have to remind myself that when we authorized this study, one of the trustees at Frenchtown wrote a letter to the editor basically saying, why would you want to redevelop the Lazy Boy site? So I'm not surprised that Frenchtown went down this road. Based on their experience and based on what was in the paper last week about the logistics and distribution facility that they turned down, candidly, I think they need basic education in economic development 101. That's my opinion. But that's up to them. That's their municipality. But I do think that in order to really get an idea of what all could happen on the Lazy Boy site, we need to really take a look at all the different concepts to determine what we like and what we don't like. So that's the reason why I would support this proposal, because I really would like to see what a big box would look like, even though I may not be in favor of it, but I need something to compare it to. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Other comments? I'll make one. As we went through the process with the discussion on the 425, and then this comes up when their 425 was not, Frenchtown Township didn't have an appetite for that. They came back with an alternative, and we'll, as a council, will have to take that up here soon. And we could sit back and wait and see what happens with that with the council, but with MKSK being engaged at this time and looking at least that large parcel that sits furthest to the back, is at least what Frenchtown is willing to have discussion on in a different sense of property swap. We'll see how that comes from administration, how that's presented for us to embrace that. I think doing this information kind of along the lines as Councilman Michelangelo is having it done, at least knows where we're at. I think there's still an avenue to get to where we can make it more appealing, why there should be a reconsideration to a 425, no matter how that gets to be, whether it's now or at the last moment. If we don't have the full perspective of what it could be, then we're offering not only developer less, but really our discussions with Frenchtown, as they may or may not continue. But if they do, we'll have something additional as well. So I understand the point of we're spending some additional funds asking for MKSK to do the work. But if we don't do it, will we be asking later when they've kind of separated, and will there be a greater cost? I don't know. I'm willing to move forward with as proposed at this time, but I do appreciate the conversation because we are looking at it this way as a council of the what is going to be a great development opportunity, I believe. So I'll see if there's other comments from council or Councilman Felder if you have anything further.
Thank you for the information. I just want to thank the city manager and Councilman Michelangelo for the information. I was not aware that the developer wanted to pursue other options. I thought that they were more amenable to some of the alternatives that were already on the table. That's unfortunate.
If there's no other conversation, item is on the agenda for council's consideration or action.
Yes, regarding item number 2352, the motion, I request the motion be approved and all actions be carried out regarding item number 2352.
I'll second.
There's a motion by Councilman Moore, supported by Councilwoman Germaine on item 2352, amendment to the proposal for the Lazy Boy sub-area plan as presented. If there's no further comments, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining?
Yes.
Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Whitman?
Yes.
Echoangeli?
Yes.
And Mayor Clark.
Yes. Next item is
There are no further items on the agenda, Your
council
Honor.
comments. So we are in March, so Councilwoman Vining, your comments this evening?
Yes, Your Honor. I was driving down 3rd Street and saw the progress at the fire station. That's really exciting with the glass going out front on the building. So I look forward to being able to take a tour and see what's going on the inside. Also, on Saturday, March 23rd, there will be a mobile food truck pantry at the Oaks of Righteousness. I don't know if you all remember, Mr. Omar Furden came, he started a support group. We attempted to start it at ALCC, but it ended up at the Oaks. And Next Step Support is really grown. We've been able to help a lot of people. There's a lot of good work going on there. But anyway, we got together along with Oaks of Righteousness and ALCC and purchased a Gleaner's food truck. So we'll be able to give out food to the first 250 families, Saturday, March 23rd from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And that'll be at the Oaks of Righteousness facilities there, the old St. Joe's Church. So first 250 families can come and get a food box. And there's no need to, you don't have to pre-register or anything. Just bring your ID to show that you are a Monroe County resident. And that's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Germaini.
I just want to say that I'm very excited about the future development that we have coming up in our city and the opportunities that we're all going to have because of it. And all the hard work that everyone's putting in for it. I appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Lamore.
Yes, Your Honor. Infrastructure, that's what we're talking about tonight. A lot of infrastructure. You know, and in the past council meetings, the port, tonight, the old Lazy Boy site, and the Comfort Inn that's going in on North Dixie. Has 3 different locations in the city of Monroe. We really have a lot of opportunities in front of us. You know, just some of them need a jump start, more or less. So let's keep the ball rolling on these projects. Let's keep moving and doing what is necessary to keep them rolling. A lot of good things can happen when the infrastructure gets rebuilt, and that's what Monroe needs, a good influx of it. So let's keep it moving as a city council. That's all, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilman Felder.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to yield some of my time tonight to Mr. Lewis to let the city residents know when they can expect yard waste pickup to begin.
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's actually not what I expected Councilman Felder to ask about. Here I have some information on those pedestrian LED signs on North Custer. But first, I'll tell you that yard waste pickup will start with your regular collection day the week of April 1st. So if your collection day is Monday, it'll be the 1st. If it's Thursday, it'll be the 4th, and anywhere in between there. So that's all I have. Unless you'd like me to give you an update on the signs, but...
If you would like to.
Because I went back to the office to get the information, so I might as well have it. And actually, I have to give credit, and I don't know if Mr. Pastu wanted me to introduce him. I wanted to introduce you this evening, so I might as well do it now. Christopher Schaefer just started with us 2 weeks ago. He is the assistant city engineer, so I don't know if you want him at the podium or just can see him standing up, but...
Something. Come on up.
Yeah, come on up, Chris. You can say something, and then I'll give him credit. I'll give him credit because he's the one that actually did the research on the signs for me. So.
Hi, my name is Chris Schaefer. I'm the new assistant city engineer hired by Patrick Lewis here. I've done 3 to 4 internships here at the city of Monroe before. I've been pretty familiar with this place, and I've been doing some of the legwork behind what Patrick's been working on, what you've heard here today, and I look forward to working more with what he's got to offer here at the city of Monroe.
What engineering school?
University of Toledo.
Okay, cool. Good.
Welcome, Chris.
Welcome, Patrick. Chris.
During the budget time, when I've talked about our intern partnership with the University of Toledo, this is one where we were able to extract a full-time employee from that program. So it's been very beneficial to the city, and Chris, of course, is our shining star from that program. So anyway, Chris did a lot of background work because, as I mentioned, my staff at the time was focused on getting the contracts out. So I told Chris, I said, well, this is what we're looking for. Have you got some different options? And as I think I pointed out, I don't want to say the cheapest option, but one of the ones that's fairly effective is we did find some LED signs that will flash around the perimeter, have LED lights around the perimeter of the strong yellow-green sign that can just flash continuously. There's solar, they're $800 if they're single face, or around $1,500 if they're double face. Well, what we'd probably look to do is put one of those at each of the leading crosswalks at those two intersections that we're raising. We could consider it at Avenue de Lafayette as well. So if you were looking to sign those, and that's the most basic, and those would run all the time. I can tell you, I know of one other installation that they have those. The Village of South Rockwood actually had the quarry put in a couple of those signs. Two stop signs on Sylvania Drive that actually have the flashing red LEDs around the perimeter, and then two in front of the quarry where it's the truck crossing signs. And I know those run all day. I haven't heard of any complaints about those, and so I know there's at least one local municipality using those. So we do have that option. It's something we can just order and put in stock. Our people can put the sign channel up and do all that. They do have some push button options. Those start to get a little more expensive, and again, those are if you want the pedestrian to activate the sign. And those, there are a couple of ones that have more of the flashing bars that will actually give you a little more, alert, and that'll only go off if there's a pedestrian wishing to cross. We want to look into those a little bit more from a cost standpoint, because if it's push button activated, they'd have to be ADA compliant. So the issue with those is having to put in a little extra sidewalk and making sure we meet all ADA requirements. Those, I think, were around $2,500 a sign. So if we wanted to go up that next level, that's what we'd be looking at. Of course, the most expensive option is the push button overhead hawk signals, I guess you call them. We didn't price those out. We felt that those were likely outside the price range that the council would be looking for, but if council directs, we can certainly look at those options as well. So I think that was the report, and I thank Mr. Schaefer for his work on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. No, those are all the comments I have this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you. Councilwoman Whitman.
Yes. Last week was, there were several events where they were celebrating the good people that live in Monroe County. I happened to be at the Everyday Heroes, at Making Connections, and at the Seroptimist event that was Friday night, I believe, where they gave awards to people who have, the Seroptimists give awards to young girls so that they can go to college or complete their education. But two of them really stuck out for me, and one was Dr. Miller, who has, he had a meeting with over 200 of his patients, and he discussed the use of pain medications. And he informed all of his patients that he was going to start backing them down on the doses. So he asked them, instead of taking 4 pills a day, try taking 3. And he explained about addiction, and many of his clients did not realize that they were addicted to these pain pills. It was getting to where it wasn't 10 o'clock yet, and they were thinking about it, which is, the beginning of a problem. So he had only out of over 200 patients, he had 6 who walked out and haven't been back. All the other ones were agreed to work with him on the medications, and one lady, an elderly lady, worked herself off of all medications. She found out that she didn't really need them, that there were other things, yoga, meditation, things like that she could do. So I just wanted to bring that up because, we talk a lot about the things that Monroe needs, and we need everything. City Council is focused on making Monroe a better city. But there are other people that work just as hard as we do. And I was very tired at the end of the week. I felt like a party animal. I ate everywhere I went, and it was a wonderful week to see all the other things that are going on in Monroe County, and that people are being honored for their hard work. There was one little boy, too, that he won an award because he went to his uncle's grave, and his uncle was a veteran. And he went to his grave, and he saw that the marker was dirty. So he went and got soap and a sponge and started cleaning off the marker. And so far, he has cleaned 90 markers, where he is going around and he feels that those people deserve respect. And he's going around, and when he came to accept his award, he was dressed in combat uniform with a helmet, and they honored him with a new bucket and new sponges and some soap. And so there's a lot of good going on too. And I was very happy to be there and to witness that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Michelangeli.
A couple of comments, Your Honor. One, I would hope that when the Planning Commission and the administrative staff get into more detailed on the Comfort Inn, that we push the developer to put more brick into the building. That intersection is going to be a very important intersection. It is now, but it's even going to take on a different character once ProMedica builds their new regional hospital. And I do think that the city should put its best foot forward relative to the quality of the buildings that get built in the city. And I know that this developer, he was here a year ago, and he hasn't been necessarily the easiest to work with, but I do think that we should, because it's going to be a PUD, we should ask for higher standards. The other comment that I have, it's regards to the housing quality discussion that we had at the last council meeting. I did receive quite a few emails from residents saying that they're glad that the city council is going to start taking a look at the housing quality issue. I respect the comments from the lady that wrote the letter regarding rental property. One of the things I think the council has talked about in the past is having a graduated system of inspections based on people that maintain their properties get inspected not as often as people that we have problems with. But the question I have, and it's really for the city, ask the city manager, when do you think that the administrative staff would be able to present some options at a workshop meeting to council regarding this issue?
If I may, we got to finish up a couple of things with the budget here shortly. April is usually somewhat busy, but I'm thinking if we had some time in May that we might be able to put together kind of a report based on some of the comments that were discussed at the last meeting and try and give some thought to internally how we can address a handful of those, looking at what it would cost from a standpoint of additional inspection personnel. I think, certainly working with the city attorney to build a structure in there, knowing that there'll probably be an enhanced enforcement aspect to it. So I'm guessing if we could, maybe early May would maybe an appropriate time for us to.
One of the workshops in May?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
that's fine. The other comment that I have is something that's kind of gnawed at me a while, and that is I'm going to ask the city manager and maybe the mayor on this one. In Saturday's paper, usually on the third page of the paper, the Monroe Evening News has a crime map. And they point out all the crimes that have happened in the city of Monroe, and they show their geographic location. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but the problem I have is none of the other communities in Monroe County have a map, and nor do they have their crime listed. So the Monroe Evening News is doing the city a disservice because we're the only ones that they show crime happening in the county. And I think that impacts the value of our community and the value of the property in the community. Somebody picks up the paper, they open it up, they see the crime map, and it's just of the city of Monroe. So my request is either the Evening News takes the crime map out of the paper, or they put a crime map in that shows all of the county and all of the crime that's occurring around the county, and not just single out the city of Monroe. So that's really a conversation I think the manager and probably the mayor need to have with the publisher at the Monroe Evening News. But I just wanted to bring it to council's attention because it is kind of concerning. I don't like the image that it paints for our town. So, Your Honor, that's all my comments.
Thank you, Councilman. I guess it wasn't on my list, but I'll start there because it's a conversation of the past. As we know, there's been transition at the Monroe News. There'll be Monroe News transition in the future with some changes there as well. So it'll be an item that'll be taken up with the, I'll just say as that transitions administratively there at the Monroe News. But it goes back a ways when it was discussed, but I will say what you see when you go on the alternate day, and I don't know if it was today. I think it was today, yes. I read that is a narrative of the other crime reporting activity in a sense. I'm not sure it's everything, but it's a collection of items that are outside the city. But the difference is with that, which is fine because I can't say they're not reporting activities that the community should have awareness of. I think that we would want to know if there's a particular activity that's in someone's neighborhood or location. But Councilman, your point's right. One's a map, it's easy to see a point, look at two words, and you move on and you think about all these dots on a map. The other is 6 or 8 items that were in today's paper that identified activities, a little bit more longer narrative, and do they all get read to what the significance of what they are? So it's providing information in 2 different systems, which it does cause some complications. So I'll put that on the task list as we move forward with some of the administrative changes that are happening at Monroe News and see how we go forward. So I have a couple comments, but thank you, Councilman, for bringing that up. I guess I might as well start there. It wasn't on my list either, but the letter written tonight, and I think, Councilman, you hit it right on, that this council has discussed about over the years about in this council about rental inspections. So really, when I listened closely what the letter said and started lacing out those kind of bullet points that she had, were things that we had talked about, and I think there is a way to do that. And we have some landlords, I think, that are very appropriately take care of their properties. And that said, adjusted, I'll just say, review that the councilman mentioned, I think is an alternative. So I look forward as we move forward to that and as the administration brings that discussion to council. So a couple of activities that are coming up that I thought I wanted to announce this evening. On this Thursday, it's a short notice, but it's been out there. I know it's been out in the media as well. As on March 21st from 5 to 8 o'clock, the River Raisin National Battlefield Park Foundation is having a program. It's kind of the future of the park, but also the Maitland family, who their young lad has visited every national park in our country, and are going to be he's going to be recognized, and their family's going to be recognized. But there's some other activities going on there. The other activity is coming later. It's on Friday, April 5th, 7 to 10 p.m. The River Raisin National Battlefield Park Foundation is also having a Wildlife of Michigan art exhibit, local artists, but there's also taking consideration of those that wish to display during this. Both of these can be found on their website, and their website for the foundation is battlefieldfoundation.org. There is a cost to attend, but hopefully if you can't make the first one here, it's short notice for this week, think about the one on Friday, and there's some others that will be there as well, and I know they've reached out for a lot of support, and that's greatly appreciated. The next one is kind of a reminder. We have our sister city, of course, with Hofu, Japan. 25 years. Last year was our anniversary, but we still continue to seek students that want to apply and represent our community. And the Friday is the deadline for applications, but it's a simple form to fill out, plus get a couple references. And the interviews will be coming up shortly, but those that may be watching, opportunities still to fill that out. You can go to it's Monroe International Friendship Association is the organization, our volunteers that manage the program for the council and for our community. And we take students from countywide because it is recognized, I think, not only from the city of Monroe, but our other partners here in the county about the importance of that. Their website is MIFA, M-I-F-A, Monroe.com. So it's MIFAMonroe.com. The last thing I have is kind of an ask because it goes along a little bit with some of our previous discussions. I know it might be a little soon, but I know that we also had an opportunity, a presentation on some downtown redevelopment and proposals on some residential. I know we talked about that here, about moving forward with some potential letters of intent to go out. It's just, as we look at our calendar, it always comes up very quickly, and I don't want to, for us to not be short on time, but just an update is all I'm looking for in the future, not today, but maybe at a meeting coming up, because I didn't have a chance to share it with the manager. I thought about as we're making some notes here. So maybe it's a next meeting or so where that might be at, how we're moving forward, as was discussed here at the council, some things we'd like to be sent out in a broader sense to potential developers. So last one I have is for the administration, and I know Mr. Green's here as well. Maybe think about it as we were talking about all that infrastructure work that in those projects, and a couple references back to the Planning Commission as well. So I thought about tonight's agenda item, and I know items are shared back with Planning Commission because we know that the hotel project will go back for their review as well. But I think about this fact sheet on the utility and resurfacing program bid, that those items go back to the Planning Commission because they had input, and they were also a discussion on some of what the capital improvement projects were. And I'm certain that they get some of that back, but we have new Planning Commission members as well. And if it's nothing more than getting them back the fact sheet, by chance they don't see it, an opportunity, I think, to see some of the projects that have come forward and some that, and gives them a broader basis understanding is working between the Planning Commission and the council and sharing information. So that's just kind of an ask that goes back, and maybe we'll see that when we attend Planning Commission, see what discussions are. So that's all I have this evening. Clerk Treasurer Lavoie and Deputy Clerk Smith, any comments this evening?
No, I just wanted to remind those voters in 3 North that are in the Jefferson School District that if you want an absentee ballot, please make sure you contact the clerk's office, and those should be scheduled to go out by the end of this week. And again, I think this affects about 40 voters in our city, but it's an election, and so all of the requirements that you see at a normal city election are what we are held to, and we are delivering on all of those things. The other thing is just another reminder that we are not collecting property taxes, real property taxes, at the treasurer's office, and they will be available soon to be paid at the county treasurer's office.
Very good. Deputy Clerk.
Actually, I'd like to say that they are available to be paid at the county treasurer's office now.
Have they released?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I'm sorry I didn't tell you that.
No,
But
that's
yes.
Good.
Other than that, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come tonight and figure out how all of this works.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing you again as well. I know that it's important to make sure that we have both and people to be able to help us through our meeting, because we rely on the clerk treasurer's office and the staff to make sure we do get everything recorded and done correctly and keep us on task. So thank you both tonight.
You're welcome.
Mr. Pastu.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a couple of items. A lot of the notes Mr. Lewis covered with introducing our new assistant city engineer, and then also talking about the crossings there on North Custer. A reminder that next Monday night we do have a budget workshop. A lot to cover, a lot of items, and we hit on a few of them, certainly with the water and wastewater operations. And we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the bid process. We didn't get a chance to go into it tonight, but today we had a bid opening for lawn maintenance and got nothing. And so we have to talk a little bit about operationally how we're going to handle some of that, and we'll be ready to do that a little bit next week. And then also, we did the Munson Park concession bids and got nothing. And so it's a strange phenomenon. It's not just limited to Monroe, but it's a kind of, you see more and more of it where there's a lot less interest in some of the services that we had contracted out for. So having said that, we'll talk and carry forward with it a little bit next week. I think is it 6 p.m. when we start next Monday night?
That's what we've discussed, yes.
Okay, yeah. So
We'll look forward to that. Hopefully we don't have to go to livestock to take care of the grass in the city. I don't think that's going to be
all alternatives will be considered.
All alternatives, exactly. With that, any comments from those present here this evening? Any final comments? See none, motion is order, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Support. Motion by Councilman Moore, supported by Councilman Felder to adjourn. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining? Yes. Jermaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder? Yes. Whitman? Yes. Echoangeli?
Yes.
And Mayor Clark?
Yes. Thank you all.